Looks like it's time to get going. Welcome, I'm Rebecca Wallach and joined by my colleague Rachel Holtzman. And today we're going to review um, and present on MECM and looking at issue spotting and troubleshooting common issues in this new eligibility system. Next slide. All right, a little bit of housekeeping. Everyone is on mute. Please post as many questions as you have in our Q&A, and we will do our best to respond to them. We will send out a copy of these slides, and this training is being recorded. It will be available on NYLAG's YouTube website. You're welcome to share these materials with others. And I see already we're getting questions about the materials from the previous training, and we have some updates on that, and we'll be able to share with everyone on this webinar where they're posted. Next slide. Okay, let's start with a really important caveat. This is the information that NYLAG knows and understands about MECM as of just today, July 9th. This information a few weeks from now may very well be out of date. MECM systems and processes are changing every day. And DOH, the Department of Health, has not yet issued official guidance on this eligibility system that went publicly live in December of 2025. The guidance that we're providing in today's webinar is really based on our conversations with the Department of Health, our advocacy, and our casework. We will do our best to keep everyone up to date on what we understand about MECM in our New York Health Access article that is linked here on the slide, and we'll put it in the chat as well. NYLAG, a minute on New York Legal Assistance Group. We are a civil legal services nonprofit, and we use the power of law to help New Yorkers experiencing poverty or in crisis combat economic, racial, and social injustice. Next slide. Our unit, the Evelyn Frank Legal Resources Program, we are a healthcare access unit. We're focused on fighting for older adults and people with disabilities to have access to affordable healthcare coverage that meets their particular medical needs. We have a specific focus on accessing long-term care, and we are out in the community training. We are counseling individual clients or their loved ones, representing individuals in denials and reductions of home care, and engaging in policy advocacy. Next slide. I hope everyone on this call is familiar with, this webinar is familiar with NY Health Access. This is a website, a labor of love, but coordinated by NYLAG, the Empire Justice Center, and the Legal Aid Society. Here's where we try to keep the community, the entire state, up to date with important Medicaid issues. Next slide. And please stay in touch. Hopefully you learned about this webinar from a friend, or maybe it was from our e-newsletter. We don't overwhelm you with a lot of emails, but it's a way to find out about our free online webinars, other trainings, and other changes to the Medicaid program. So please join. And then next slide. We're happy to share that we've updated our NY Health Access article on our to include our webinars. And so if you go to this link here, you'll be able to see all of our recent webinars, a link to the YouTube recording, as well as, when possible, the opportunity to download the slides. So for anyone who was email or in the Q&A saying, I didn't get last training slides, they are available online here. Please share that around. And I'm just going to touch on our agenda and then pass this over to Rachel. We're going to quickly introduce everybody to MECM. This is a repeat of things that we've shared in the past, but I think it's good for us all to be on the same page. We're going to discuss which cases can be in MECM right now as of today, July 9th. We're going to go through a variety of issue spotting or troubleshooting issues that we've identified with MECM so you can help your clients, and then end with where you can go for help and Q&A. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Okay, so for those of you who joined us last time, this is going to be a little bit of a repeat, but again, just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So what is MECM? MECM is a back-end eligibility system. And what I mean when I say eligibility system is this is a system that processes applications and renewals to determine eligibility. So you can think about this as the door that someone has to go through to get Medicaid, or you can think about this as like a lever. It's on or off. You either do qualify or you don't qualify. As I said, MECM handles eligibility, and right now it's for the non-MAGI Medicaid, some non-MAGI Medicaid cases, and we'll explain which ones, and for MSP, which is the Medicare Savings Program. In the future, additional populations beyond the non-MAGI Medicaid populations currently eligible for MECM and beyond MSP will be included. MECM, does not handle services like approving someone's physical therapy or reducing someone's home care hours. It is not at all about services. So again, it's just, do you qualify for Medicaid or MSP or do you not? It's not about services. And this is a multi-year project that DOH is undertaking from 2023 to 2032. So it's essentially a decade-long project, and ultimately the goal is to migrate all cases from the local departments of social services, or in New York City we call it HRA, which uses a system called WMS, and to move all of them into NYSOH, and specifically the system that's the MECM system. So again, ultimately all of these cases, all Medicaid cases that are currently at the district, will be brought onto the website. And New York has contracted with Deloitte. Deloitte is the contractor to develop MECM. So MECM is now a third eligibility system in New York. And how does that work? So, I just said that you can sort of think about eligibility systems like a door that you have to move through to get your Medicaid, that's the application, or to keep your Medicaid, that's the renewal, or sometimes called recertification. So on the left, we have the door for NYSOH. That's for MAGI Medicaid cases, and it's on the NYSOH website. On the right, you have the really old system. This is WMS, the system that was built in the 70s, that's used by the local districts, and that historically has been the system or the door to go through for all non-MAGI Medicaid cases. Well, now we have a third door, and you see it in the middle. We have a smartphone to show you that this door is the newest eligibility system. And this green door is MECM. So certain non-MAGI Medicaid cases and MSP cases right now will use this new door in order to get and keep their Medicaid. And how many enrollees are in each system if we're just trying to think about numbers? So on left, you see these two doors. You see NYSOH and you see MECM. And on the right, you see the WMS, the older 1970s system. So between NYSOH and MECM, there's roughly 4.1 million people. And on the right, for WMS, there's roughly 2.6 million. And as I explained, ultimately, all 2.6 million that are currently in the WMS system, that old system at the local districts, all of them will be brought into either NYSOH or MECM. And so I'd say, if nothing else, hopefully you really pay attention to these next few slides, and we will, all of these slides are going to be available on the link that's in the chat, the most recent link in the chat that says see recordings and slides from our past webinars and trainings. Part 1 is there, and as soon as this recording is available on YouTube, we'll also link to that and have the slides there. So please make sure to check out and maybe even print out the next few slides. Okay, so whose case can be in MECM right now? So on the left are the cases that are at the local district. On the right are the cases that are in MECM. So non-MAGI Medicaid cases with at least one of the following, any of those bullet points on the left, if there's at least one of those cases need to be at the local district. And the MSP cases for anyone whose Medicaid case is at the local district, the MSP case should also ideally be at the local district. On the right, we see MECM. This is for non-MAGI Medicaid cases who do not have any of these bullet points on the left, but who do have They can have, but do not need to have spousal refusal budgeting. That's okay. You can still be an MECM, but you don't need to have it. And it's okay if these people have home care through a mainstream plan. So you may hear about different types of Medicaid plans. There's MLTC plans, for example. You cannot have home care through an MLTC plan and be an MECM. You can have home care through a mainstream plan. And for example, people who are undocumented and 65 years or older, they receive home care through a mainstream plan. So they could get home care through a mainstream plan and their case could be an MECM. And then also the MSP cases for anyone whose Medicaid case is an MECM. And also the MSP cases for anyone who does not yet have Medicaid. Those can also be an MECM. So the non-Magi Medicaid cases on MECM, these include new cases. So people who have never had Medicaid, or maybe they're Medicaid, they haven't had Medicaid for a few years and they're applying for Medicaid. But also the cases that are in MECM are existing cases from other systems that are being brought into MECM. So existing cases on NYSOH and existing cases on that old eligibility system from the 70s called WMS. As long as they meet the criteria for what's allowed to be an MECM, and those essentially the bullet points that I just had on the slide that are sort of in the background here, if they meet the criteria, then the cases are being brought into or transferred into MECM in monthly batches. But it's important to know, if you are in New York City, there is a pause for cases transferred from HRA into MECM, meaning your client's cases, if you are an advocate or a social worker, if you're someone in New York City, if you're a family member in New York City, you should not be seeing Medicaid cases from HRA scooped into MECM. Those are supposed to be paused. And we're going to talk a little bit more about troubleshooting in a few slides. But rest of state is still transferring their cases slowly into MECM in batches. Once a case is brought into MECM, the renewal date should be the same as it would have been if they were brought from NYSOH into MECM, or if they were brought from rest of state WMS into MECM. The renewal date is supposed to stay the same. Okay, so this is the slide that I would recommend you print out and maybe post at your desk. We really tried to break this down to help you figure out sort of what to do for your clients. And you can really think about it in two different ways. We have what if they need certain types of services, or what if they need special type of Medicaid budgeting. So let's look at the top for needs services. So if you have a client whose case is in MECM, this whole slide is for people whose case is in MECM, and they need home care, then first you need to ask what type of home care. So if it's through a mainstream plan, then yes, they can stay in MECM. That's no problem. But if they need home care through an MLTC plan or through fee-for-service Medicaid, also called straight Medicaid, which is people who get their home care directly through their local district, they have to transfer their case from MECM to the local district. And they have to follow the NIAP process, and we're going to talk about that on a future slide. What if you have a client whose case is in MECM and they need services, specifically home and community-based services through a waiver? So that's the OPWDD waiver, traumatic brain injury waiver, nursing home transition and diversion waiver, or the children's waiver. We have 4 waivers in New York State. They must transfer their case to the LDSS. And the way to transfer is through an email that only advocates are able to use, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so what if your client is in MECM and they need special budgeting? So if they need spousal refusal budgeting, those can stay in MECM, but all the other types of special budgeting that you see here, chronic care, nursing home budgeting, a pooled income trust or a resource trust, a surplus, which is also called a spend down or excess income, if they were recently approved or applying to be a part of the Disabled Adult Child Program, also called DAC through Social Security, or the Medicaid buy-in for working people with disabilities, all of those cases cannot be in MECM. They must be transferred to the local district. And again, there is an email address that advocates have access to. And so if you are an applicant or a recipient, you can connect with an advocate who can send an email, and we'll talk a little bit more about that email address in a later slide. Okay, and with this, I'm going to kick it over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, so now that we've level set, we are going to move into some of the issue spotting and troubleshooting guidance for MECM based on our experiences so far with the project and with the program. All right, so let's move to the next slide. Common MECM issue number 1. Anna Maria thinks she has health insurance, but she isn't sure if she has an active Medicaid case and or an MSP case, the Medicare Savings Program. And if she has health insurance, she's not sure where her case lives. Is it at the district or is it in MECM on NYSOH? What should you do? Okay, here's our best advice as of July 9th, 2026. Number 1, you really want to look at the client's recent notices. Ask the client for all copies of their recent notices or letters from the local district /HRA or the New York State of Health NYSOH. Those notices are going to help you and help you understand if the client has coverage and where the client's coverage lives. They offer many clues. If you still, and we're going to go through that in the following slides. If you still have questions, we would recommend that you reach out to a NYSOH assister or an MECM assister. These assisters are sort of have special powers, and they're able to look into your client's NYSOH portal or MECM portal to identify the coverage that the consumer has. If the first 2 bullets don't work, then you may consider emailing the advocate's email address, which we'll discuss on a later slide. Next slide here. It's very, very important as we all need to become fluent in understanding these 3 eligibility doors. And so we're going to go through, and we've done this in the past, but we really think it's worthwhile, go through and review how you can identify from the notices where your case lives. And it's a little bit of a game. So let's go to the next slide. Again, here are 3 doors. On the blue door, we have the NYSOH system for Magi Medicaid with the laptop. Then we have the green door, the most up-to-date door with the cell phone. That's MECM for non-Magi and MSP, which is also on the New York State of Health. And then the old-fashioned computer above the red door, which represents WMS or the Welfare Management System at the local DSSs or HRA in the city. So here's a slide here. Here's an example of a notice. The question is, what does this notice tell you? We see it's kind of an old-fashioned notice. It mentions managed long-term care. It's the address is Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. So let's move to the next slide. Many New York City advocates will know that this notice is an example of a case that is with HRA in WMS. How did I know? The CNS notice, the kind of old-fashioned type, and also it said MLTC. And I know MLTC enrollees cannot be an MECM. All right, next slide. Here's another one. Notice of acceptance of your medical assistance application or recertification, and it says NYSOH at the top. Big clue there. So let's go to the next slide. This is also an example of a case that lives on WMS at HRA. Let's go to the next slide. Here we have a New York State of Health branded notice. So now we know already this is a NYSOH case, but is it a NYSOH Magi case or is it a NYSOH MECM case? Here's where you're going to look. You're going to look at the account number, which starts with AC, and you're going to look at the marketplace ID, which starts with HX. And so that means that this is a NYSOH case that's using the Magi budgeting processes. Of course, there's a slight exception to that we'll get to later. And so we'll go to the next slide. And this is behind the blue door. All right, and now we have another example. By the process of elimination, you may have figured out that this is an MECM example, but let's look at the NYSOH branding, the New York State of Health branding. And again, we're going to look at the case number and the member ID number. If the client's case is in MECM, the case number will read MC, and the member ID will start with the letters PX. So really, the notices give us the best clues as to where our clients' cases live. Of course, you're going to want to look at the date of the notice to get a sense of about how recent it is, because things can shift. All right. Next slide. All right, the green door, MECM. And I think that ends my section. We're going to move on to the next MECM issue.
Great. Okay, so Jennifer received notices from HRA and from NYSOH. And the NYSOH notices show two different sets of IDs. She's confused about what the notices mean. What should you do? Okay, so this is about something called, so this is related to being scoop and dumped. And I'm going to show you some examples of the notices. Okay, so bear with me. So cases that are scoop and dumped from the local departments of social services into MECM, they first do a tiptoe month in NYSOH. So you can imagine step 1 is they're at the LDSS. Step 2 is they do a tiptoe month in NYSOH. And step 3 is they finally land permanently in MECM. And again, I will show you these notices. During the tiptoe month in NYSOH, the consumer is going to receive notices with NYSOH identifiers. So as Rebecca just showed, those NYSOH identifiers. Only after that month is done and after the case is then brought from that step 2, from the NYSOH tiptoe into MECM, where it's going to land permanently, only then will the consumer receive notices that have their permanent MECM identifiers. Again, we just want to remind everybody that this scoop and dump process from the LDSS into NYSOH for the tiptoe month, 1 month into MECM, this process is paused for New York City, at least until September, and it may be longer. There were some issues, and so the state has paused it from New York City. But these scoop and dumps from the rest of state are still ongoing, and they're happening in monthly batches. So let me show you what these notices look like. And I understand that this is confusing, and this is why we're all here to try to understand so that we can help our clients. Okay, so this is an old example. So pardon the fact that it says 2018, but this is an old example of a case that's being transitioned from the local district onto NYSOH. Now, right now, there are no MAGI cases that are transitioning from the local district onto NYSOH. It's only non-MAGI cases. So again, this is an old example, pardon the fact that it says MAGI. But something that looks like this, where you see in this first paragraph, it says, and it may say something like this, where it will say you must renew your Medicaid coverage with New York State of Health to continue your coverage. So this is one of those CNS notices that comes from the local district. It's, pretty blocky, no sort of colorful logos, a lot of sort of black text, pretty text heavy, and it's telling you that you no longer renew your Medicaid coverage with your local Department of Social Services. It's telling you the date that your coverage is going to end with your local Department of Social Services, and telling you that you must renew on NYSOH. When it says NYSOH, it may mean MECM. So if your client gets some of these notices, it's really important that they're keeping all of their notices and that you look at them all together as, you are their advocate. Look at them, look at the dates, and maybe you can piece together that maybe this is step 1, where their local Department of Social Services is notifying them that their case is leaving the local Department of Social Services and being brought into NYSOH. Okay, so this is a notice showing the tiptoe month. So they're going to get a NYSOH notice. As Rebecca explained, it's going to have NYSOH identifier. So it's going to say AC for the account number. And the marketplace ID is going to start with HX. And this is just for 1 month. Okay, so the notice will say something like, your Medicaid coverage will continue until your renewal. You will get a notice from the New York State of Health when it's time to renew. Now, please tell your clients, particularly upstate clients, although we need to start getting the word out to New York City clients as well, even though this is paused until September. Please tell your clients that if they get letters from NYSOH, even if they're not used to getting letters from NYSOH, they do need to open them. And this is a really big behavior change for a lot of the non-MAGI Medicaid families that we work with, and EFLRP, and that many of you work with. They're not used to receiving notices from NYSOH, and they may throw them away thinking that it's spam. But it is very, very important for them to keep these NYSOH notices. and for you to look at them and look at the dates and try to piece this all together. So this notice could be the tiptoe month that somebody has Medicaid just for that 1 month in NYSOH. And now finally their case lands in MECM. So again, after 1 month tiptoeing through NYSOH, they land in MECM. How do we know that they're in MECM? Again, it's a NYSOH notice branded as NYSOH, but this time the case number starts with MC. You can see that up here on both of them. And again, sorry that the images are small, but you can see the slides later. And the member ID starts with PX. You can see that here, and you can see that here. And again, remember, for the NYSOH notices, the account numbers start with AC, and the IDs start with HX. I know these are very, very small ways to tell, but it's what we have now. And so it's so good that you're here to learn so that you can help your clients understand what's going on with their case. Okay, so if your client, this is going to be the first type of notice that a client whose case has been scoop and dumped into MECM, the first type of notice they're going to get from MECM. It's going to be either telling them that their case has been renewed, administratively renewed, which means, so right here it says, it's time to renew your health coverage. We've reviewed your renewal information, and it says no action is required. This means that the system had all the information it needed because it was able to ping other state sources and federal sources. It has all the information it needs. And guess what? It already renewed you and you don't have to do a thing. So I hope all of your clients get these notices on the left. And this is one of the benefits of MECM is we're moving into this 21st century system that is electronic and up to date and can ping other data sources. And this is really one of the best features of MECM is for some clients, they are not going to need to fill out those renewal packets anymore. The system is going to be able to renew them automatically. It's called being administratively renewed or being ex parte renewed. Those are sort of the policy wonky terms. But the most important thing to know for the left is it just says no action is required. So guess what? You got this notice. It's telling you that in February, you just continue to qualify. Your client doesn't need to do anything at all. So if they were moved into MECM and they were able to be administratively renewed, this is going to be their first notice that they get from MECM. And tell them to keep these notices from NYSOH because, again, you want to write down those MECM case numbers and member IDs because those are the numbers that are going to stick with them. On the right, you see someone who the system was not able to administratively renew them. And so this one, it says it's time to renew, but it says actions required. We cannot make a decision based on the information we have. We cannot make a decision to renew your coverage. Please update information on your NYSOH account by this date. So these notices are getting sent to people who the backend system could not get all the information it needed from state sources and federal sources. And so it's sending a notice to the client saying, hey, you need to go log into NYSOH or work with an assister to log into NYSOH, and you need to renew. So these are important notices to keep an eye out for. Okay, and with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Rachel. And there's a good question here that I'm just going to read out before we move on to issue number 3. So if someone has MLTC and their case was transferred to MECM during the tiptoe month, they won't have MLTC coverage like home care, etc. That is a couple of things. If a person has MLTC and their case is transferred to MECM through the tiptoe process and eventually to MECM, that was an incorrect transfer because not only can the person won't be able to access home care during the tiptoe month, but they also won't be able to access home care once they're in MECM. Unless they're in a tiny, tiny exception where they only have Medicaid only. So in that case, if your client has lost coverage, that's something where you're going to want to advocate immediately to get the case back to where it belongs. We'll talk about some of the ways to do that, but a good start would be to connect with an MECM assister, to call the NYSOH hotline, helpline, etc. Reach out to us, that kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to move on to common MECM issue number 3. This is a very common issue that we get questions about. In this example, Elliot's Medicaid case is in MECM. He's been approved for coverage in MECM, but now he needs home care through an MLTC plan. What should you do? How should you advise Elliot? All right, our answer right here is hot off the presses after a conversation with the Department of Health just yesterday, July 8th. But I want to underscore and emphasize here that we do not yet have this process in any kind of written guidance. However, this is how we are going to be treating this situation going forward at NILAG. So the first step is that Elliot needs to make sure that MECM and the New York State of Health knows that he now needs home care. He can do this in one of three ways. He might choose all three ways as this system gets operationalized. First, he himself could go into his MECM portal and update his MECM case file to show that he needs long-term care. We suspect that not all of our clients will be able to do that. He can also contact an MECM assister, and that assister is able to mark in his case that he now needs long-term care. And this would be our first recommendation. And then the third option is to call the NYSOH call center and tell the call center, once he gets transferred, hopefully to the MECM group of employees, tell them that he needs long-term care. And then that group of employees is able to go into the case file and indicate that he now needs long-term care. So that's step one. Step two, Elliot must now undergo assessments through the New York Independent Assessor Program, sometimes called NIAP, and we've provided the phone number here. There are two assessments, sometimes three, but really it's going to be two at this point, where a nurse will come and see if he meets the ADL minimums, and a physician or nurse practitioner or physician assistant will review the nurse's assessment. He should learn about needing to conduct the NIAP from us because we've been to this training and we're relaying what the Department of Health has shared with us, but he should also learn about it in a few different ways. If he called the NYSOH call center, that staff should verbally notify him that he needs to contact NIAP to schedule those assessments. And we were also informed that once the MECM system indicates that the member needs long-term care, that a letter will be sent in the mail notifying that person in writing how to contact NIAP. So that's step two. Then what happens? Step three, next slide. Okay, so assuming that Elliot has a favorable outcome, he gets an outcome notice from NIAP that says he is eligible for MLTC or PCS or CDPAP. We believe, and it's a little gray here, that NYSOH will know, will get information from the NIAP individual system and put into process a manual process that transfers the case from MECM to the LDSS. I wouldn't just rely on that. I know we're all, I guess, avid advocates on this call and on this webinar. So I would say, in addition, the individual should get back in touch with the assister that they're working with to share that outcome notice. They may also want to call the NYSOH call center and share that they've had that favorable outcome notice from NIAP. Now there's still another step. So we don't know how long it's going to take for that case to move from MECM back to the LDSS. But once the case does get back to the LDSS, the client's case still doesn't have the appropriate level of coverage for long-term care. So any case on MECM that exists with Medicaid is for Medicaid without community-based long-term care. Essentially, the consumer has attested to their resources in the month of application. In order to get Medicaid with community-based long-term care, a supplement A typically needs to be submitted with the application, along with documentation that proves that the individual is resource eligible. So now that the case is at the LDSS, we were advised that it may not actually be a supplement A that's sent to the consumer, but documentation will be requested to document and prove resources. What's the bank balance? Is your IRA in distribution status? Things like that. And then the LDSS has to upgrade the coverage code from code 20 to code 30 so that the person can access long-term care. Around that time, maybe you're doing things simultaneously here. Elliot can now shop around for an MLTC plan and sign the enrollment paperwork that has to be completed by the 18th of the month for services to start the first of the following month. So this is the process as we understand it. It's long, and I think we can expect some delays. Some thoughts that I have here for the group would be if your client needs home care, if you think they're going to need home care soon, they absolutely should apply at the district. Second, and not on MECM, so they don't have to go through this transition process. Second, in some urgent situations, you might consider a reapplication at the district. That comes with its own headaches. It may that application might be denied because of the case on MECM. So we expect to do a lot more advocacy in this arena. I do see a question about immediate needs, and we've thought about that. Will immediate need be the fastest way to get home care? It could be, but we don't have the answers yet. That's going to hopefully be in the guidance that we receive from the Department of Health. So this again, big caveat, this is what was shared with NILAG and other advocates at a Medicaid Matters meeting with the Department of Health yesterday, July 8th. This is how we understand the process as of July 9th, and we are waiting for that guidance and for something in writing, but this is how we're going to proceed on the cases as of now. I think I keep going. Yes. All right. Common MECM issue number 4. Wenru is a 70-year-old woman with Medicaid and Medicare. She has a Medicaid case at HRA. With the help of a company who called her on the phone, she doesn't remember who, she applies for MSP, the Medicare Savings Program on MECM. Her Medicaid case at HRA suddenly closes. What should you do? Next slide. Okay, how to troubleshoot this issue. This is a due process violation. Your Medicaid case, whether it's at HRA or on NYSOH, cannot close without advanced written notice. This individual should call OTDA to request a fair hearing right away, and we've provided that number on the screen. They can say that their case was closed and ask for aid to continue. We recommend that these requests be made over the phone because we've seen a delay in processing online and faxed hearing requests, and we want to get this person's coverage open and active as quickly as possible. And then we have a link here, contactlawhelpny.org for assistance from hopefully a nearby legal services group. DOH is aware that this problem of applying for MSP on MECM when you have an active case at the district is a systemic problem. It's a systems issue, and they're working on fixing it. They've shared with us that they hope that it would be permanently fixed by August. In the meantime, there's supposed to be a manual process to identify these cases and reopen them without requiring a fair hearing. We're not sure how well it's working, so we really do recommend requesting that fair hearing, and we do hope that the fix is in place by August, but we're not sure that it will be. The big takeaway in terms of advice to your clients who are navigating MECM is that you should always apply for the Medicare Savings Program where your Medicaid case lives. So Wenru should not have been encouraged to apply for MSP on MECM. If she needed MSP, it should have been through her local district. In our little scenario, that was with HRA. Next slide. This is kind of the reverse. Anna is a 75-year-old with Medicare. She has an MSP-only case at HRA and then applies for Medicaid on MECM. She starts receiving NYSOH letters about her MSP, and she's confused. What should you do? Next slide. How to troubleshoot. In this case, you actually don't need to do anything. If someone applies for Medicaid at MECM and their MSP is at the district, their MSP case, as we understand it as of July 9th, 2026, will move to MECM eventually. And so the Department of Health is working on making an automatic feedback loop to notify HRA to close the MSP case once it becomes active in MECM. We don't know when that fix will be in place, but this is less disruptive than our scenario for WNRU. The main takeaway again here, though, because this can be very confusing to have two benefits, two Medicaid benefits and two separate eligibility systems, is to advise our clients to avoid this situation. And really, clients should apply for the benefit that they don't have, whether it's Medicaid or the Medicare Savings Program, in the system that currently houses the benefit that they do have. I hope you're following. So in WNRU's case, she should have applied for MSP at the district. And in Anna's case, we would have wanted her to apply for MSP on MECM. Next slide.
Great, and I'll take it from here. So Juliana received a notice from NYSOH telling her that she needs to take action to transition to MECM. When she tries, she finds that her account is locked. She's unable to make the change. What should you do? Call the NYSOH call center. We have the number up on the screen. It's possible that the notice was actually just sent out too early. And so you should ask the NYSOH call center when the client actually needs to take action, because it's possible that the notice came premature. Okay, MECM issue number 7. Kelly applied for the Medicare Savings Program on MECM, and she was approved. That's great. However, now it's been multiple months since she was approved, and her MSP case is still not activated, meaning she's still not getting the benefits. So what should you do? This is actually a systematic issue that has been raised with the state, and we're not exactly sure when or how it will be fixed, but a few options for things to consider. She could call the NYSOH call center and make a complaint stating that, that she's not yet received her benefits, even though she's been approved for them. She could work with an MECM assister and ask if they can help. And in general, a recommendation that we always have for all of our clients, and we hope that you also recommend this for all of your clients, is to please keep track of all of the letters that your clients receive, all application dates, all documents, the people who they spoke with, if they called the NYSOH call center on the phone, what was the name of the representative and what time did they speak with them. Really try to document everything in case you need to prove at some point that, yes, she did apply, Kelly did apply, and yes, Kelly was approved, and yes, it has taken 3 months to get her benefits. You really want to keep a paper trail for yourself. Okay, MECM issue number 8. Peter uploaded documents that were required of him on his application or his renewal on MECM. But for some reason, the system continues to ask him for the same document without telling him what was wrong with the document he just uploaded. What should he do? This is also a systemic issue that has been raised with the state. One thing is, please check your mail, save your envelopes. Again, make sure to document everything. You can call an MECM assister and ask for their assistance uploading documents. It's possible that there's something wrong with Peter's computer, but the more likely thing is just that it's a glitch with the system. But he really should keep proof of everything that he's tried to upload. So saving screenshots, saving proof, and all the steps that Peter has tried to take, and everybody who he's spoken with. Again, if Peter calls the NYSOH call center, keep track of that. What time did he call? Who did he speak with? In case he actually needs to show this to a NYSOH hearing officer at a fair hearing. So let's say that his Medicaid case is closed or his application is denied because the system said that he didn't upload that document, but he did, in fact, upload it multiple times. Peter should keep that proof so that when he's speaking with a hearing officer, he can say, look, judge, I uploaded it this day at this time, this day at this time. I called this MECM assister who uploaded it a 3rd time, and then I called this other MECM assister who uploaded it a 4th time. So really keeping that proof, keeping a paper trail can be really helpful. Okay, issue number 9. Jackie was approved for Medicaid on MECM, but she never received her Medicaid card in the mail. What should you do? This is another systemic issue that's been raised with the state. But this one, we have heard that the fix really works. So by calling the NYSOH call center and asking them to issue a new card, this has worked successfully with other clients recently. So we do feel good about this way to troubleshoot. Calling the NYSOH call center and asking them to reissue a card should fix this one. Okay. And then with this, I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca.
Thanks, everybody. Let's move on to common MECM issue number 10, and it's also going to be our opportunity to discuss a little bit and share a little bit of information about NYSOH appeals. So in this case, Valerie's Medicaid case is up for renewal in MECM, but she has excess income. She fills out her MECM renewal paperwork indicating that which shows that she now has surplus or a spend down. And a few days later, she learns that her Medicaid case is closed and she receives a Medicaid application packet in the mail from HRA. What should you do? Okay, these are some appeals tips. So first of all, a Medicaid case cannot close without notice, without advance notice. Second of all, when your case transitions from full and active coverage without a surplus to Medicaid with a surplus, your case isn't closing. The way you're getting the service, your coverage changes, but your case shouldn't have closed. So this is absolutely a due process violation. We advise that you help the consumer call the NYSOH appeals unit, and we've included the phone number here. You want to do that quickly right away to request a fair hearing and to request aid to continue to put the coverage back up so that the case can go through the proper process to be rebudgeted. All right, so that's number one. This is a problem also because when you have full Medicaid, you are now a recipient of Medicaid. So if your budgeting changes, you should never be treated as an applicant, like you have to reapply. You already have that benefit. Your case just needs to be rebudgeted. And so for that reason, we see this as a systems issue, but we don't have any sort of time frame for when it's going to be fixed. We really, again, just kind of basic Medicaid coverage issues, public benefits coverage issues. Our clients need to open all their mail and keep their mail so that if this does happen, we have the right paper trail to advocate on their behalf. If you end up at a fair hearing, and of course, reach out to Law Help, we have provided a couple of NYSOH hearing decisions here where the hearing officer reversed the discontinuance and referred the case, that Medicaid case, back to the district with a preserved renewal date. And so we're going to provide these slides to you. You can click on those links and you can review how the ALJs, the administrative law judges, have directed the state to treat this kind of case. All right, so let's move to the next slide. And let's just review a little bit and share a little bit of information about MECM appeals. All right, so here we have a complicated system for Medicaid fair hearings at this point. If your case lives at the LDSS or HRA on the far right, your Medicaid fair hearings for eligibility and services like home care or DME, those are both going to be administered by the Office of Administrative Hearings, which is a department that's part of OTDA. If your case is in the New York State of Health and you have MAGI Medicaid, if you need a hearing about your eligibility, whether the start date, whether the discontinuance was correct, whether the denial was correct, you're going to go to NYSOH appeals. However, once you have that coverage, if there's an issue with your services, you're back at OTDA. So now in the middle, we have New York State of Health for MECM. And so for the first time, brand new, If our non-Magi clients have an issue with eligibility and their cases in MECM, and we know that based on the notices, the hearings and the aid to continue orders have to come from the New York State of Health. So that's a really big change. We all have to be aware of this so that we're directing our clients to the right venue to be heard. However, services fair hearings are still with OTDA. So next slide, we want to share with you a little bit about what we know about NYSOH appeals. We have, through advocacy, the NILAGs, Legal Aids, and Medicare Rights Center, we were able to get the Department of Health to update the NYSOH appeals FAQ page to reference MECM and some of the major questions we have about the process for these fair hearings. This is your go-to source for information about NYSOH appeals, which I also call NYSOH fair hearings. Next slide. And here on the NYSOH page, here's a screenshot of the two forms that need to be filled out in order to request a fair hearing. There is the DOH 5231, which is the appeal request, and the DOH 5232, which appoints a representative. Okay, so next slide. I think we have copies of them. So this is the appeal request. For now, for the legal services attorneys and legal services case handlers on this call, our best advice, and for social workers and advocates that represent individuals at fair hearings, our best advice is to have this completed and to fax the form in and keep the fax receipt. The next slide. Unlike with OTDA, you also need a second form to appoint a representative. This is for non-legal, non-law firms to complete. It requires a signature from the consumer agreeing that you will be their representative. If you are an attorney or work for a law firm, you can also, instead of or also include a letter on your organization's letterhead explaining that role, and you should be listed as the representative. Again, we recommend that it's submitted by fax. And then we also wanted to share, this is where the appeals decisions are published, and you can find a lot of interesting information here about how the MECM benefit is being administered, what the issues are consumers are facing, and they could be a good reference should you be representing at a fair hearing. Next slide. I think that this is for you, Rachel.
Perfect. Okay, so we're getting close to the end. Thanks so much, everybody, for sticking with us. Okay, so common MECM issue number 11. Ron applies for Medicaid on MECM, and he marks that he needs home care on his application. He receives an MECM notice in the mail saying that his Medicaid application has been denied. What should you do? And let's say that he marked, that he needed home care. So this is also an appeals tip. He has two options. He could apply for Medicaid at his local district of local Department of Social Services. This is probably the quickest way to get an active Medicaid case, but if he already submitted an application, let's say 2 weeks ago at MECM, and now he decides to submit an application today at HRA, it's not guaranteed that HRA is going to respect, his original date of application on MECM, meaning the date from 2 weeks ago may not be preserved. If retroactive coverage is needed, and the original date must be preserved. And he should preserve it via a fair hearing. So he can request a fair hearing, and he has the right to, because this is a due process violation, because his case should not have been denied. It should actually have been transferred to the appropriate eligibility system, which is the WMS at the local Department of Social Services. So he can call the NYSOH appeals unit and request a Medicaid hearing. And, if you're helping, you can say that Ron's case was denied instead of properly referred with the application date preserved. And please write down the fair hearing number. Again, you can contact lawhelpny.org to find a lawyer. At the fair hearing, you can cite to the decisions that we have here. In these, somebody applied, had some sort of criteria that made it so their case could not be an MECM. The system should have referred their application and preserved the date referred it to the local districts but didn't. It had sent them just a denial notice. And the hearing officers reversed the denial and ordered that the case be referred to the appropriate local Department of Social Services and ordered that the application date be preserved. Our understanding is that in the future, these applications, well, by law, they shouldn't be receiving a denial notice now either. But in terms of how the system is working in the future, our understanding is that the way that it should work is that MECM should be referring these applications to the appropriate LDSS. But right now, there's sort of a glitch with this referral process and it's not working smoothly. But again, please remember, if your client needs home care, through the way that most people get, non-Magi people get home care, which is through an MLTC plan or through straight Medicaid, they should not be applying for Medicaid on MECM. They should be applying for Medicaid at their local Department of Social Services. Okay, another common issue, number 12, and we are almost getting to the end. Michelle has applied for Medicaid, and she receives a notice from NYSOH notifying her that her application was denied. The notice, however, leaves her pretty confused. It doesn't adequately explain her due process rights. For example, it tells her to call the NYSOH call center to find legal representation. The NYSOH call center is staffed by Maximus. They don't know who the lawyers are. Also, it tells her that she's over income or over resourced, but there's no detailed copy of the budget. So she doesn't really know what they used to make their decision. What did they add together to come up with a number that's over the budget or over the income or resource limit? Also, it doesn't tell her how she can upload evidence for the NYSOH hearing officer. And it also doesn't tell her how she can request evidence from NYSOH. And she has a right for all of this information to be in her notice. So what should you do? Tell your client, help her appeal by calling the NYSOH appeals unit and to request a fair hearing. This issue with the notices is, again, a systemic issue, and NYSOH hearing officers know about this. And you can cite two fair hearing decisions. There are many fair hearing decisions at this point that specifically talk about how MECM notices are not adequate. And so you can see these are just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are just 6, but there are more than this. In all 6 of these MECM decisions, the NYSOH hearing officer ruled in favor of the appellant and discussed and explained why the notice was not adequate. Really, really powerful language in these decisions. So that is a reason for the notice to be overturned. So take a look at the notices. If they do not explain the person's due process rights, that notice is faulty and must be overturned. Okay, issue number 13. Bonnie received a notice telling her that her Medicaid case in MECM was discontinued because her resources are above the limit. What should you do? First of all, of course, investigate and make sure that Bonnie is resource eligible for Medicaid and, make sure that it was wrong. But if it was wrong, if the notice was wrong, then you can help her to appeal, request a fair hearing with aid to continue. And for this one, she already had Medicaid. Her Medicaid case was discontinued. So she should ask for aid to continue to maintain her Medicaid coverage while her fair hearing is pending. This is also a systems glitch in MECM. The system is incorrectly attributing resources to clients. And we know that the NYSOH call center staff, at least some of the call center staff, some of the fair hearing representatives, some NYSOH hearing officers know about this issue. Again, we've pointed to some hearing decisions here. These are MECM decisions. And these first 2, MECM incorrectly counted somebody's primary residence or their primary vehicle towards the resource limit. And that should not be. Your primary residence and your primary vehicle do not count against you. And in these decisions down here, the system found a phantom property in some database and thought that the property belonged to the applicant or recipient, and so said that they were over resource limit, even if they actually sold or they lost that property long ago, or even if they never owned that property to begin with. So there's sort of a phantom property issue in MECM that we know about, and your client should appeal. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Rebecca for just a few more slides.
Thanks, everyone. We realize we're at time, but we're going to keep going. If you have to drop off, we understand, but maybe you'll catch the end of this webinar on our YouTube page once we post it there. So wrapping up, and we really are close to the end, where to go for help. So there are some Department of Health emails Let me talk about them. First, if your client's MAGI Medicaid case, so if they have NYSOH and they're part of that expansion group under the ACA, and they have a case in NYSOH and they need to move back to the district, you can use HX Facility, the HX Facility email address on the screen, to contact NYSOH and ask that the case be moved to the district. If you are an advocate and you have questions about your client's case, you have issues, someone lost services, you need some assistance from the Department of Health on a variety of issues, you may use this email address, DEMI eligibility inquiries. But really, caution, caution, caution. This email address is only to be used by advocates who are not assisters. And it may not be used by applicants, recipients, family members. It really needs to be someone who is a professional employed to assist clients in navigating these systems and getting them the services that they need. Next slide. A great resource for anyone who's navigating MECM, and something that we really recommend that your CBO connects to, is an MECM assisters. MECM assisters have completed an online training and they're certified by the Department of Health to assist consumers with the MECM online portal. They can help with applications, renewals, they can take other case actions like indicating that the case needs to move from MECM to the district for long-term care. And they are working with MECM members all the time, so they're going to be able to help troubleshoot certain problems and issues that come up. Currently, MECM assisters are facilitated enrollers for the age blind disabled category, or FEABDs. Maybe we've already referenced that in this training. But in the future, and we don't know when, the Department of Health has shared that additional groups will be able to undergo this training and have access to the system as MECM assisters. Next slide. All right, and this is how you can find an MECM assister. It's a great online system. You're going to go to the New York State of Health. You're going to click on Live Help in the left corner where the cursor is right now, and you're going to follow the directions that Rachel has put in the chat to locate MECM assisters that help 65 plus groups. So really, this is a great way to access assistance. Again, I think we've said this a lot during the training, but really this is our webinar caveat, is this is the information that we know as of July 9th, 2026. These systems and processes are changing, and we are still waiting for official guidance on MECM from the Department of Health. Please keep coming back to our website and our article on MECM on NY Health Access. That is where we make every effort to post updates to the group. And keep in touch. We will be sharing these slides, but we really thank all of you for spending this hour and a few minutes with us. Join our newsletter. Check out NY Health Access. We have information about our intake system, which is as well as how to contact other legal services. So with that, thank you so much, and we appreciate your time and all of the great questions that you've all had today. Thank you.
Thanks.